Jen has ordered a decadent seafood tower, king crab legs, lobster tails, and a waterfall of caviar. Pricey? You bet. But Jen worked with Empower on her savings and investment strategy and planned for splurges like these. She got good at money, so she can be a little bad. Ooh, champagne. Empower. Invest well, live a little. Start today at empower.com.
Past performance is not indicative of future returns. Investing involves risk. You may lose money. Advisory services are provided for a fee by Empower Advisory Group, LLC, EAG, a registered investment advisor with the Securities and Exchange Commission. OMG, those shrimps are really jumbo.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon Prime. From streaming to shopping, Prime helps you get more out of your passions. So whether you're a fan of true crime or prefer a nail-biting novel from time to time, with services like Prime Video, Amazon Music, and fast free delivery, Prime makes it easy to get more out of whatever you're into or getting into. Visit Amazon.com/Prime to learn more.
All right, thank you, Scott Shannon. Thanks to all of you for being with us. Write down our toll-free telephone number if you want to be a part of the program. It is 800-941-SEAN. If you want to join us as we speak, we actually have it queued up to the beginning, and we might play parts of this here. European leaders, President Zelensky, all meeting with President Trump at the White House, and that would include the NATO Secretary, European Commission President, the French President Macron, British Prime Minister Starmer, and the German Chancellor Merz, and the Prime Minister of Italy, and the Finnish President, all there at the White House. Now, what's amazing about this, if you follow the state-run legacy media mob, you would have thought Friday was an unmitigated disaster. None of this would be happening if Friday was an unmitigated disaster. And, the president said something that it just really stuck with me, and he posted it on Truth Social. He said, I'm convinced that if Russia raised their hands and said, we give up, we concede, we surrender, we'll give Ukraine and the great United States of America, Moscow, St. Petersburg, and everything surrounding them for 1,000 miles, the fake news media, their Democratic partners, would say that this was a bad and humiliating day for Donald J. Trump and one of the worst days in history. It is a sad thing that it's if you can have success, and if you really you got to start with this. Donald Trump is cleaning up Joe Biden and Europe's mess. Let's just be blunt about this. I mean, here you have Putin amassing troops on the border of Ukraine, amassing military equipment on the border of Ukraine, and the president of the United States at the time, Joe Biden, doesn't even pick up a phone and say, what the hell are you doing? Whoa, slow down. You've already annexed Crimea, but that happened during Obama and Biden's watch anyway. And so the fact that, nobody ever held them accountable for any of this, and then Biden turns this into a proxy war by providing hundreds of billions of dollars in military equipment to the Ukrainians, even more than Europe. And it then becomes a proxy war between Russia and the United States, which it never should have evolved into. They should have had meetings prior to an invasion. Don't. The stupidity of Joe Biden. It depends if it's a minor incursion. And I'm looking at these European leaders, and I'm not really impressed with many of them because they didn't do much about this either in the lead up to this moment. And you really can't blame Europe enough. If you go back to Donald Trump's first term, and he tells the story of Angela Merkel and the white flag of surrender that he handed her, and she goes, "What's this?" He goes, "Well, that's the white flag of surrender." "Well, why are you giving me this?" "Because you just surrendered." She had done a multi-billion-dollar energy deal with Vladimir Putin and Russia. And if you look at all the energy that has been purchased by Western Europe as it relates to Russia, they have funded Putin's war machine. And they never engaged with him. All they've ever done is isolate him. They never wanted to pay their fair share to NATO. And, the idea of ignoring him did nothing to advance a better relationship with him. It's not like they called and said, hey, can we meet? And they didn't want to meet. So Donald Trump is playing the key role here. It really does piss me off that before, the Alaska summit, all these European leaders wanted to tell Donald Trump, how to negotiate with Vladimir Putin when none of them ever tried and none of them are capable of pulling it off. Now, the president did rightly mention the other peace deals that he's been engaged in. India, Pakistan, he played a role. Israel, Iran, he played a role. Rwanda, the Congo, he played a role. Serbia, Kosovo, he played a role. Thailand, Cambodia, he played a role. Egypt, Ethiopia, he played a role. Armenia, Azerbaijan, he played a role. And, I would argue that the only reason that Putin even went to Alaska is because Donald Trump insisted that NATO up their contributions from 2% to 5%, and that they really have to start paying it in terms of their percentage of GDP. He did the European Union trade deal that included nearly $1 trillion in committed oil, energy purchases, gas purchases from the United States. That's money that is taken directly out of Putin's war machine. He put the 50% tariffs on India because they were importing Russian energy. And he agreed to sell the most sophisticated weaponry on the planet Earth to the Ukrainians and to NATO so that the fighting can continue because Vladimir Putin was being so stubborn. And then finally, I would argue those are the four main reasons that Alaska even happened. But you really do have to pause for a moment here and understand something that is deep and profound and historic between Friday and Alaska and how quickly the president was able to get these European leaders to show up at the White House is nothing short of miraculous. And it shows, the great Barry Farber, one of the great pioneers of talk radio, he said there's never been a country in the history of mankind that has accumulated more power and abused it less than the United States of America. And he added to that, and I add to that, there's never been a country in the history of mankind that has accumulated more power and used it to advance, the good of mankind more than the United States. If you really think deeply about it, you don't have to even go that deep. If you think an inch deep about it, the country that gains the least out of all of this, and that goes for all the other peace deals that I mentioned, is our country. It's not like we're doing this for some benefit to the United States or that we're going to have some type of financial windfall or that we're going to have some type of territorial gain out of any of this. No, we're not doing it. The president keeps emphasizing again and again that he wants the killing to stop. And if you really stop and think about it, nobody else that is in this room that I'm watching right now, and right now the Prime Minister of Great Britain is speaking, but we'll get to that in a second. The only person on the world stage right now that could even think about pulling this off, whether he is in the end successful or not, he's trying. And the president even mentioned he thought this one would be easier. He said, of all the peace deals I've been involved in, I thought this would be one of the easier ones. He said it turned out to be the harder one. But he's in the game. He's engaged. He's moving at the speed of Trump. He got all these European leaders to get on a plane over the weekend, fly here, and Zelensky's here. And the hope is that they'll have trilateral meetings as a result of all of this. Putin agreeing to trilateral meetings. Also, Putin agreed to NATO-style protections resembling NATO's Article 5 agreement, which I'll give you some specificity of in a second. The bottom line is because NATO's not on the table, that's always been Putin's position. That was one of the big mistakes that Joe Biden opened the door to that possibility. And, even President Trump put out a truth last night that said that Ukrainian President Zelensky could bring the nation's war with Russia to a halt almost immediately if he's willing to make two major concessions, and they are major. And I'm not saying that I like any part of this deal, but I'm giving you the reality of what this deal is going to look like in the end. There are going to be land swaps. There's probably going to be an increase in the territory that Russia in the end has. If you're looking at the Donetsk or the Donbass region, and the high population of Russian nationals that are there. And in exchange, the president is assuring President Zelensky that, in fact, if he wants to, if he will get all the security guarantees that he needs and wants for his country, but he's got to give up any hope that Crimea is coming back. Now, Crimea happened in 2014? That's 11, 12 years ago. And that happened under Obama and Biden's watch. That's not going to be an issue that's going to be on the table for negotiation if you want the war to end, if you want the killing to stop. So those are two very big things. If you're going to have any lasting peace, is that on the other end of this, President Zelensky is going to need major security guarantees. And by the way, Europe needs to play a big part in all of that, but also the relationship with Ukraine and our country is going to be a big part of that. And if you accept that Ukraine's not going to be a part of NATO, but Putin conceding that he'll give security guarantees so that you don't have a third invasion, I would argue that that is a win. If you're looking at NATO and Article 5 and what it means and how it applies to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, it's the principle that if one NATO member is attacked, it's considered an attack on all members, and it's pretty much been the cornerstone of this 30-member alliance since it founded in 1949 as a counterweight to the Soviet Union. The problem is all these European countries have not only become complacent, they haven't wanted to pay their fair share in terms of military protection. Donald Trump is fixing their problem. That's why he upped their commitment to NATO. That's why he's selling the weapons to Ukraine and actually selling it vis-a-vis through NATO so that they can determine what weapons are needed for Ukraine to even stay in the fight, stay in the game. Do I like any of it? I don't. Do I think anyone's going to be completely happy with the deal? I don't. You know, Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Now, the president did point out in the other 7 conflicts that he played a role in that he did not get to the point of a ceasefire, that they can go straight to an end to the war, and he thinks it can happen quickly. The president literally is talking about if they can get an agreement on a trilateral meeting, and we just had President Zelensky say that he wants Donald Trump to be there, which is what Donald Trump reiterated to me after the summit that took place in Alaska on Friday. I think that would be a big win for the world. So, you know, a lot of this that's happening right now before our eyes is historic, but I think it's a couple of huge, big concessions from Putin that, of course, the legacy media mob and people like Chris Murphy will never recognize. And I think the president using the example that if, you know, all of a sudden Putin turns around and says, yeah, we'll give you St. Petersburg, we'll give you Moscow if you have a peace agreement. Yeah, let's do that. Anyway, so the president also saying that he will call Putin today after meeting with European leaders. I think all of this is historic, and I can't give you what the final outcome is going to be. I can only hope for the sake of innocent men, women, and children that are dying, that the dying and the death stops. You know, it was funny. There's some Russian reporter shoved a camera in my face when I was in Alaska and said, what would you say to President Putin? I said, stop the killing. How many more dead Russian soldiers do you want? How many more dead women and children do you want? You know, what are you looking for here? What's the end game in all of this? And, you know, so we'll see what happens. But the media is just as corrupt as ever. You know, for Chris Murphy to go on Meet the Press, by the way, the best moments of Meet the Press and the best moments on CBS this weekend were Marco Rubio. I mean, he's giving, I don't even know why they invite him back, because every time these hosts have him on, he just humiliates them and embarrasses them and just makes them look dumber than we even thought they were. All right, 800-941-SEAN is our number if you want to be a part of the program. Listen, the bottom line is medications sometimes are in short supply. Until we get our own manufacturing of pharmaceuticals up and running, which is all part of the $15 trillion in manufacturing commitments that Donald Trump has been able to secure, that means we are still dependent on foreign countries for very critical key medicines that you definitely want to have on hand for yourself and your family, things like antibiotics, that should be basic 101. Whenever I travel, I always take my Jace case with me. And, the prices of these medications could go higher. There could be shortages like we have experienced in the past. And anyway, you want to hurry, take action. Make sure that you and your loved ones have your medications on hand before prices skyrocket, especially with pending tariffs from certain countries. Anyway, for Jay's case, for example, has 10 prescription antibiotics and emergency medications. Most affordable, most secure way to get these essentials. Every family should have one. You can get up to a 12-month supply of your daily prescription medications as well. Anyway, don't wait. Just go to jase.com. Mention my name, Hannity, when you check out. You'll save $25. That's jase.com. Every family needs a Jace emergency case. Have one. Have it on hand. Have it just in case. A Jace case. jase.com. Promo code Hannity.